I'm Erica Lukes, host of UFO Classified. For me, life isn't simply black and white. Life is full of many unknowns. It is my goal to travel the world and to work with the world's leading experts in the hopes of making groundbreaking discoveries. Join me on UFO Classified Friday nights at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, only on KCOR.
Classified. UFO Classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Well, good afternoon, my friends. I'm Erica Lukes, and I just literally pulled in the door from going up near Skinwalker Ranch, and I had a wonderful time. I took Chris Marks out there, and we actually filmed an interview in the desert about 15 miles away from the ranch and had an amazing time. And I look forward to getting that video edited and getting that out to the public. Even more information than my past two radio shows with Chris. So if you don't know about him, he was formerly employed with Bigelow and stayed and lived at the ranch for 6 years. I would definitely recommend listening to those interviews, getting information out. As you know, I'm a listener-supported show. I am here every week because I care about you and getting good information, and I simply feel right now we are not getting information that we need. My guest tonight is a person that I respect a great deal and a person that has done this for a long, long time. I actually had my first conversation with him a few weeks ago, and we talked for a couple hours. It was wonderful. I love learning from people like Don Schmitt. He has been around, worked with Hynek. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. He is the former co-director of the J. Allen Hynek Center for UFO Studies, QFOS. He served as the director of special investigations for 10 years. Prior to that, he was a special investigator for Allen Hynek and the art director for International UFO Reporter. That's really cool. He graduated from MATC with a degree in commercial art. And Don, I have to say, I did not know that about you. I'm going to have to talk to you more about your art.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
In fact, I was quite fortunate in that I was a professional artist by the time I was in sixth grade. I was selling my artwork already at that time, and I had more of my teachers encouraging me to just go directly into the field of art. But it was already being replaced by a lot of computer-generated, illustration and graphics and so on. So then even after METC, and then I went on to Concordia, and I got my bachelor's in liberal arts. So I expanded because I sing with a professional choral group. So I've always been very much into the arts as far as illustration and in singing. I played piano many years ago, and that kind of fell to the wayside. We still have a grand piano here. And I keep promising someday, I'm going to sit down and hopefully it'll come back. But and then the writing became more of a second occupation, and that's what I've been, primarily doing for the last 30 years. So I've been so fortunate. Can't deny that.
And that is absolutely amazing. And we'll have to make a promise that the next time we see each other at a conference that you and I are going to get together and make some, play, sing, do whatever. I was in the University of Utah Concert Chorale. And
yes, we had talked about that.
And yes. And it's just, I love that. And it is so interesting to me to see how many people that are in this subject are so attracted to the art.
We have my original director. She has a theater named in her honor. Just imagine that the city creates a theater on your behalf. And I'll never forget the opening night, the inauguration. We performed between Hal Holbrook doing his Mark Twain Tonight and the Smothers Brothers.
Oh, my God.
The
Smothers Brothers?
Didn't meet either any three of them. but because we were obviously caught up in our own performance. But it keeps one entirely grounded, and that's the wonderful thing. I think so many of our colleagues, so many people that we associate with have become so transfixed, have been, they're so targeted as far as on one particular item in life. And to me, that's sad. That's unfortunate, because especially within ufology, you're going to be more disappointed than ever, feel that you've accomplished something. That's just the nature of the beast. But we need to have other outlets. We need to, as I said, remain grounded. And that's the wonderful thing about music and art. What better therapy, what better as far as, almost comfort food, in the sense that you truly feel like you're giving something back. And when you have a talent that you can share with others, and I'm sure you feel the same way, Erica, it's wonderful. It truly is.
And it's so true. I think for me, because I really took a dive into this, it's been a part of my life, the art and the UFOs and paranormal things. But when I really, back in 2013, became so obsessed with it, and it was really interesting. I'd never picked up a paintbrush, and after a series of sightings, I picked up a paintbrush and just started painting clouds and sky, and just all of these things, and it really stirred something in my soul.
It clicked. It was there, right?
It did. It was just absolutely stunning. And I look back at my artwork now, and I just see that was what I was going through. And it was really a beautiful, transformative process. The whole thing, the UFOs, the art.
I mean, I
love it.
I do too. And I seriously believe that if I had 3 additional lifetimes, one would have been strictly as a classic artist, and then the second one would have been as a classic musician, and the third would have been as a classic performer, as a singer. I love, and I especially when I can sing with younger people, and we're doing the classics, we're doing Mozart, we're doing Beethoven, we're doing Tchaikovsky. We've done entire tributes as far as to Handel, and I love, bi-yearly we do like Handel's Messiah with the full orchestra and the soloists and things. And there's no greater discipline. And because of that, and that's one of the things, and then this carries over again in the ufology, the fact that, like, even at the Center for UFO Studies in Chicago, we had team players and then we had mavericks. We had people that you just could not sit down and keep them focused. It's like, we need the report. We need the information, by this date or that date, because we need people to look at it. And they were off just marching to their own drummer, so to speak. And whether it's sports or whether it's music, you have to be a cohesive unit for it to all come together and work. And sadly, that is not the case with ufology. Everybody's free to have their own opinion and do and think whatever they want. And that's the one thing I miss about Hynek, because he kept us focused. There's the goal, and we need to keep working towards that. We may, go off in different directions, different times, but we have to always come back and regroup. And I miss that. I really do.
Well, and I have to say that, that was the golden age of ufology. That's when the subject, in my opinion, had a level of integrity that I'm not sure if it will ever regain, because you had Hynek, because you had so many people that took this. This was very, very serious. And now it's just anything goes, and that's a shame, because in a lot of ways that really discredits the hard work that was done back in that time.
And you are correct. And even before that, I often talk about, and it was before my time, but the thought that when you had the 3 projects going with the Air Force, and then more specifically with Blue Book, Project Blue Book, and then with Dr. Hynek serving as their scientific consultant, which, was just a monthly jaunt down to Wright-Patterson in Dayton, Ohio, and wading through the reports that they had accumulated for him. And it was none of the hardcore stuff. Hynek always, he lamented to us that, he would expect, because he would, through the course of his subsequent visit, he would talk to SAC officers and commercial and military pilots, and he would hear of some of the most profound experiences. And then when he would go to Blue Book expecting to find these case reports, they were never there. Never there. So he realized very early on that they were going upstairs, as he put it. They were going directly to Washington. But there was a common adversary at that time, and it wasn't the phenomenon. It was the fact that we were dealing with a cover-up, the fact that the Air Force was not coming clean, that they were not playing fair. And so the lines were clearly drawn. And then after Blue Book bows out, and then Hynek would start the Center for UFO Studies in the fall of 73, he made the mistake of making that pronouncement that with sufficient funding that he would have the phenomenon solved within the first year. Give me the money and we're going to solve this in a year. Well, 10 years later, they were no closer. And here we are, almost 50 years later, and can we honestly say we're any closer? But I don't believe it's a case of where the phenomenon hasn't cooperated. Well, it's just as elusive as ever. It's right. Just that we're not working together. We're not, united in a principal effort in that we need to, again, pool our resources and pool our thoughts as to, okay, now we're going to approach this avenue. Now we're going to, really hit on the FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act front, and go after specific cases. Now we're going to focus on this one event and then see what information we can, derive from a concentrated effort. And again, it's just too many people going in too many directions, and it's hardly. And that's why I agree with you. It's hardly what it was 50 years ago.
And I just Gordon Lohr has become a friend of mine, and Gordon was with NICAP. And it's just so interesting. He has graciously donated his files to me, which, just never
Wonderful.
before seen files. Absolutely, I'm so excited. But, look through some of his reports and to see the way that they were dressed when they went out to investigations. There was a level of professionalism that, we just don't see now. And now we've got people that are storming Area 51 and people that are just making things up for the sake of staying relevant on the lecture circuit, and it's just like, wow! Excuse me. Go ahead.
One of the things that, for example, with Hynek, he always emphasized: now, boys, dress up, suit and tie, whatever we did, wherever you went, first impression, because as he would say, we're already walking on eggshells, and let's not tip the hat as far as in their favor, so to speak. And even at the conferences are becoming more and more laid back. And I'm talking about the speakers. You wouldn't recognize the speakers from the people in attendance. Right. And that was never the case with Hynek. That was never the case with Friedman. In other words, you always show them, you present them your best, because if you're going to be professional, I'm sorry, if I go to a doctor and he looks like he's just come off the street, I'm having second thoughts before he even touches me. Right. Absolutely. So, I was schooled in that manner, and it's a new crowd.
Well, it is, and it's sad when the same thing when I'm at a lecture. I'm always in a suit, and a skirt, or it's my professional gear because this is a serious subject, and it really deserves integrity, and that's what I love watching your lectures. You always and you were so professional.
Well, thank you. But again,
to emulate.
I couldn't have had a better teacher, a better mentor, and Erica, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't catch myself going, now what would Alan do? What would he say? And I love that because he's still on my shoulder in many respects. You were so lucky to have had him in your life and to have that as your mentor. I can't even imagine. And now we see, there's so many, I think, myths that are springing up about him as a person. And, we've got the show that has come out, which I actually really enjoy watching. But there are a lot of things in the show that aren't necessarily accurate or portraying things in the way I believe. Yeah. Can you talk about that, some of the discrepancies in the new show that's come out about him? Well, the show is well done, no doubt. I'm pleased that as Hollywood goes, that they're spending some money on it. But as far as the actual portrayal of Dr. J. Allen Hynek is far from accurate. They truly found an actor that looks very much like him. But I would certainly take issue with the way they're portraying his wife, Mimi, as though she was some loose woman that was while Alan was always in the field working, that she was entertaining herself in other areas. No,
Exactly.
Mimi worked. In fact, Alan Hynek would not have accomplished what he did if not for the faithfulness. And when I say faithfulness, not in the sense of faithfulness to the relationship, but faithfulness to his devotion to the subject. That she, more times than not, was his sounding board. She guided him in directions and in areas. She did so much of the editing of a lot of the manuscripts and the publications from Kufos. She was his rock in many respects. And she wasn't the best cook, because she always would surprise us with things that we'd look at it and we wouldn't know if it was alive or if it was something that she had just concocted some new recipe on, and we were her guinea pigs. But nonetheless, she treated us like her own children in that regard. And even after Ellen passed away and we'd be working in the field, and when we had the first archaeological dig at the Roswell debris field in September of 1989, and we asked Mimi to be there. And she was our chuck wagon. She cooked for us on the site for 4 days.
Wow.
And how often she would look at us and she would go, "Ellen would be so proud of you boys." And you talk about, again, the ultimate compliment. And I would hear it from her time and time again thereafter. And it just spoke volumes. But again, getting back to the show, first of all, too, most of the dramatizations of the cases were never investigated by Blue Book. These were not Blue Book cases. And I don't know why they feel the need to go to some of the more classic, more sensationalized, more media heralded cases from the time, as though they need the audience to recognize these for some reason. But Blue Book had a good number of their own reliable, standout cases. So I'm surprised they haven't relied more on the case files of the actual study. And then, as far as portraying a Hynek for actually being in the field, that seldom, if ever, happened. The one time it did happen was Socorro in April of 1964. That was about the only time that the Air Force actually invited him into the field. And otherwise, they were more concerned that as a scientist that he would be second-guessing their efforts, which was seldom to investigate. It was mostly to come up with prosaic explanations at every opportunity. And they just didn't need Hynek voicing his own opinion. And so that's another unfair representation of his involvement with Blue Book. But again, it gives him, I'm sure Alan would look at it right now and say, well, at least they're demonstrating that I was trying to, do a legitimate investigation of the phenomenon, which he did. And I was trying to come up with rational explanations, mentioning Socorro. That was one of the things that convinced Dr. Hynek, and that he would say, I hoped to as far as the highest level that I could prove that case was a hoax. And he says, I went out of my way to try to prove that Socorro was a hoax, and I couldn't. And it was because he couldn't. That's what made it all the more acceptable, all the more believable, and it made the case, rock solid. And that's where Hynek, when you consider scientifically the fact that he was a total skeptic when he first became involved, when he was teaching astronomy at Ohio State in Columbus, Ohio at that time, just down the road from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and that he would make a full 180-degree turn, that he would look at the information and look at the data and look at the facts. And again, as a scientist, without a preconceived notion as to what he was investigating. He went where the facts took him. And the fact that it was enough to turn him totally into accepting that we were dealing with legitimate nuts and bolts phenomena. And I do emphasize nuts and bolts because Hynek is an astronomer. That was the most difficult aspect of his involvement, that he just wrestled for years with the idea, how are they able to travel from point A to point B, that the distances were so insurmountable, so unbelievable, so fantastic that he just couldn't deal with that on a physical basis. And yet he had to accept that. And he did. The last time I had dinner with him, he, his fist on the table, Don, it's smacking more and more of nuts and bolts. And that's how he died. He accepted that we were dealing with an actual physical phenomenon.
And that must have been such a neat process for you to watch in him, to see how things change. And it's probably, I'm sure that's how it's been for you. It's how it's been for me. I mean, when I first got into this, my idea about things, about the way I research, the nature, the origins, all of these things, I mean, it has changed 180 degrees, as you say. And so it's a fascinating thing to watch a human being go through
the process. The process you put it. And that's where the skeptics, and more accurately, the debunkers, the scoffers, are so disingenuous. They are so phony in that there isn't a one of them who does not come into this with the preconceived conviction that there is nothing to it, that there is no legitimate UFO phenomena, there is nothing to investigate, it is all explainable, and that in its extreme characterization of their agenda is no different from those who come into the field with the opposite extreme conviction that we are dealing with a phenomenon that comes from Zeta Reticuli, and we're dealing with how many species that are arriving here in force, and you don't have to prove anything to me. I know they are here, that type of thing. Just total conviction. So one is just as extreme as the other.
Right, and it's sad that people. I mean, I've had many spirited conversations, a couple skeptics actually, and I find they're interesting, but they are true believers as well. They're
totally, as far as myopic, as far as in looking at the data, looking at the facts, as Friedman would say, don't bother me with the facts, I have my mind made up. And the point
I know,
being,
I love that.
Hynek didn't have his mind made up. He went where the evidence took him, and that is the true scientific methodology.
Isn't that amazing? I love that, and yes, absolutely. And I can't wait to learn more. I'm Erica Lukes here with Don Schmitt. We'll take our first break, and we'll be right back.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes. Erica Lukes. The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified. UFO Classified with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Toxins are everywhere, from the air we breathe to the food we eat and the water we drink. In a world where 80,000 known toxins and heavy metals threaten our very existence, how are you going to protect yourself and your loved ones? Introducing Pure Body Extra Strength, the world's first colloidal zeolite that helps trap and remove toxins as well as heavy metals from your body that are messing with your memory, clarity, sleep, and focus. Don't just take our word for it or the testimonials from our thousands of happy customers. Check out the hundreds of articles and case studies on the National Institute of Health website proving zeolite's powerful ability to remove toxins. For a limited time, listeners to KCOR will receive 10% off their first order. To get started, go to trypurebody.com and enter promo code Radio10. Again, that's trypurebody.com. Toxic junk is all around us, but now you can take back control of your health and protect yourself by detoxing with Pure Body Extra Strength. You'll be on your way to sleeping better, thinking more clearly, and feeling more energetic. Go to trypurebody.com right now and get started today.
Now, broadcasting in digital HD radio. shadows, a voice cries out. Evidence that you're not alone.
You said my name. What is your name?
Proof that the living and the dead coexist. Or do they? Every Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, join writer, producer, and paranormal investigator Greg Bakken on Ghost Box Radio as he explores, interviews, and investigates evidence alongside some of the best in the paranormal community and beyond.
6 people killed.
Ghost Box Radio, Wednesday nights exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network, because the dead don't sleep. Ghost Box Radio.
Are you ready? Ready to go inside the Matrix? Inside the Matrix.
You see, whoever controls technology controls the world.
Then tune in Sundays at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, as your host, Jimmy Brent, takes you deep inside the holographic Matrix.
Carefully designed to stimulate the mind.
Come explore a world of topics from technology, archaeology, spirituality, and so much more. Inside the Matrix will liberate you from the manipulated, parasitic entities of consciousness.
You guys ready for this?
It's time to claim your true natures as creative, divine beings inside the Matrix. Hosted by Jimmy Brent.
Who are we talking about?
Jimmy Brent. Live Sundays at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Inside the Matrix. Investigating and analyzing the experience of life. Life.
Are you ready to go? Turn your radio.
It's showtime!
Hey! Here we go, world. You're listening to the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Bring this up.
Broadcasting from the heart of Las Vegas, Nevada.
Their base is so large it has to draw most of its power from the nearby nuclear fusion plant.
The future of radio is here and now.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back and happy Photopia Friday. I'm Erica Lukes. I was happy to be here on a Friday evening and get into chat and see my friends and show supporters. I have to just thank all of you for actually caring enough about the integrity of the subject to contribute to the show and to also promote it and get it out there. I wish I had enough time in the day and I didn't have an actual business to run, because I could get out there and spread the word about the show and do what a lot of people do who have podcasts and are making money on this subject, but I don't. So I rely on you and your help to get my information out there. Thank you. I am here now with somebody who has had a lifetime full of amazing and important experiences, hanging out with Hynek, learning from the best of the best, and being involved with the Center for UFO Studies, writing several best-selling books about Roswell, Witness to Roswell, which is an incredible book. I love it. In fact, John, I want to just say that I might have to send those to you to get them autographed.
Oh, my pleasure. Yes.
Oh, I
will. Hopefully we'll see one another so we can save the shipping costs. So.
Oh, that would be so much fun. I would love to sit and have a milkshake with you and just learn more and more about your experiences. And I think it's important, as people like Hynek, as we see some of these new TV shows, and obviously they are keeping his memory alive, but they're not really portraying him and the essence of who he was or who his wife was and things like that. And so I think it's great that you talked about it.
Like mentioning even Mimi Hynek, Alan's wife, and the fact that she assisted us with our first dig at the Roswell debris field in 1989. And we've had 4 subsequent projects since. She was only with us that very first, but it was when we laid out a systematic map and we laid out a grid and we marked areas of potential entrapment, and we went through all that and got, everything all prepared for the next full-scale project, which didn't happen until 2002. That's how long it took us to put together all the people and all the funding necessary. But it happened. And it's, again, hands-on work. We are actually out there and getting the dirt under our fingernails, and we're working out in the hot desert sun for days at a time. And one could suggest, well, your efforts are futile because you're not going to find anything. Well, how do we know we're not going to unless we try? And even the Air Force agrees that something crashed at that very location, so maybe we'll find remnants of a mogul balloon, as they would insist. But we haven't. We haven't found any remnants of a balloon or a plane or a rocket or anything else. So we keep hunting. Just 2 weeks ago, we were at an adjoining ranch. And back in 1947, there was a ranch hand's son who was a bit of a pack rat. And we know for a fact that he managed to scurry away a number of actual pieces from the crash site. They were never recovered. In fact, he was later accused of even stealing a number of Army rifles, which, according to Army records, were also never recovered as much as they searched for them. And as it turns out, because there's a whole network of caves throughout that particular ranch area. So we were, once again, and we've done this for years, we're still trying to find the exact cave. We're trying to find the exact entrance. And now that we feel we have found it, we see that we're going to have to blast it open, that we're going to have to actually open it. So now I'm looking into what the regulations are with as far as within that county for the use of explosives. So we will get detonation people and we will consult with them. And again, it's hands-on. It's being in the lab, out in the field, and doing what we need to do to hopefully then write that chapter or come to some closure regarding that concern. But I mention all that, Erica, is because every time we do something like that, we invite the skeptics to join us. Every time we've had an archaeological dig, why don't you come and be there with us? And if we find something, to support your position on this, then at least we've demonstrated that we found it together, that we've, unraveled the mystery, as a team. We've yet to get a single one of them to take us up on the invitation. What are they so afraid that we're going to find that they don't want to be there when we find it?
So who have you invited specifically?
In the past, for example, we invited the late Carl Flock. And I more than once have mentioned it as far as I used to joke with the late Philip Klass. And he was already getting more frail at the time, and he made a number of trips to New Mexico prior to that time. But, Phil, why don't you just come out there and be with us at the time? And just recently, I extended the invitation for the next one to Dr. John Alexander. And I'm personally hoping he will take us up on it. But we're not hiding anything in that regard.
It is interesting to see, and I think that's really incredible. And I would do the same thing. I mean, invite people out there, because then it's what can they say? But clearly, they don't have the gumption to go, and that's unfortunate. But I guess they need their little platform as much as, I don't know what. I guess it's all about ego gratification.
I love people that solve all the problems of the world from a keyboard. Thank God we didn't have that throughout the course of history. Just imagine where we might be right now. We still may be, driving Model A cars. I don't know.
I love that. And so I have to ask you, because, Roswell, I mean, it's like, you can't think of a bigger case. Roswell, I mean, I think a lot of people get, it's like, oh, Roswell again, yada, yada. Why is this case so important?
Just as Hynek was a skeptic coming into the very subject, I was a skeptic regarding Roswell. I had never read that very first book by Moore and Berlitz, Roswell Incident. Even 5 years after the book was published, I wrote a paper where I argued the point that I just could not conceive that the government could keep something of that magnitude a secret for all that time, that we weren't that adept at keeping our mouths shut. And 4 years later, when we actually made that first jaunt down to New Mexico, and perfectly confident we would wrap this up in a single weekend, prove that it was something as conventional as a balloon with a radar tracking device or something just as conventional. But when you start talking to the witnesses firsthand who handled the material, and one by one they described the identical features, the strangeness, the high-tech characteristics of this material, and you realize, my God, what if they are telling us the truth? And if I continue to treat this as though it's something mundane, I'm going to get knocked down to the point I'll never recover. So we quickly decided we need to address it on that level and then approach the witnesses with the expectation that they would then convey to us information that could be totally fantastic, beyond the pale, nothing we had ever heard before. And we quickly would then discover that Roswell encompassed everything you could want in a UFO incident, or any incident for that matter. Everything else UFO related is very fleeting. Now you see it, now you don't. Even if it's a photograph, even if it's a video or something, it's gone. There's nothing you can take into a lab. Now, God knows we have thousands of physical trace cases. But even there, if we have a few pieces of metal slag or some metal shavings, scrapings, that type of thing, it's nothing definitive. The same with the abduction cases, even with the alleged implants that are recovered. Again, nothing that has jumped right out and proven to be of alien technology. But with Roswell, you have every possibility rolled up into one incident. You have a historic event as far as that press release that went out on Tuesday, July 8th, where they actually acknowledged they had recovered a flying saucer. And then you had the making of the cover-up with 5 hours later, Washington stepping in and explaining it all away as a weather balloon device. But then you have the witnesses coming forward years later and then resubstantiating the first press release and then describing the materials and then the bodies involved, the remains, and then a survivor. You have multiple sites. You have the government actually retrieving all the physical evidence. And then you have the government resorting to the extreme measures of abducting civilians, threatening civilians, threatening to kill children. You have their attempts at shutting down the media at that time, depriving them of their First Amendment rights, threatening them with the loss of their licenses should they proceed to continue putting out information on the incident. So it's just a spy story. It's a major mystery all rolled into one. And it happens to involve UFOs. And because of that, and because of the ramifications and the thought that if indeed it happened, if indeed the people, the witnesses, whether civilian or military, are all telling us the truth, we're talking the biggest story of the millennium. And we don't have to look up into the sky and wait for them to come back. We just have to point to the government and say, just as Presidents Clinton and Carter and Senator Barry Goldwater and Congressman Stephen Schiff and Governor Bill Richardson of New Mexico, they have all pointed their fingers at Washington and said, we want the truth, you have it. And they refuse to give it to us.
And so you mentioned, something that kind of strikes accord in my heart when you say that children were threatened with their lives.
Yes.
Can you give? Will you tell me about that? Will you tell us about that?
The best example would certainly be the daughter of one of the fire crew chiefs. His name was Dan Dwyer, and his daughter Frankie just happened to arrive at the firehouse in Roswell when a state police officer by the name of Robert Scroggins happened to come through. He was going to show off a piece of the memory material, about the size of a handkerchief, that he had acquired from none other than Mac Brazo, the very rancher 75 miles northwest of Roswell up at the debris field site, who first reported the find to the sheriff and then to the military. So Frankie arrives, and she not only witnesses the men handling and passing this piece of this very bizarre, paper-thin, metal-like material, but then she gets to handle it herself. And she describes it like water flowing between her fingers, like quicksilver. She would use that word, that it would just unravel right in her hands and assume its original shape and size with not the slightest sign of any damage. And so she had to hand it back. You know, it wasn't hers. So she gave it back to the police officer, and we can only guess where it went from there. But nonetheless, within the next couple of days, there was a knock at the kitchen door. And it was a first lieutenant by the name of Arthur Philbin, who was with the 390th Air Transport Unit at Roswell. And he had a number of non-commissioned officers with him, a number of MPs. And the girls were immediately instructed to go to the room. It was Frankie and her younger daughter, Dory. And Frankie would overhear the conversation. Now, her father was still working at the firehouse, so it was just the conversation with the military officers and their mother. And then she overhears the comment, and if you ever say another word of this, now they're talking to her mother, if you ever say another word about this, we will kill your children. You will never see your children alive again. And then, in a total panic, the girls hear the footsteps approach the bedroom. And then the men step into their room. And she never forgot that officer standing there. And he was a big, and we know exactly, he was a former New York State police officer. Know his full background, and he had a booming Brooklyn accented voice. And he stood 6'4", 225 pounds, and with that baton in his hand as he kept beating it into his opposite hand. And young ladies, if you ever say another word about this, you will never see your mom and dad again. And so many years later, and Frankie would often get very emotional when she would talk about this. And it was the first time that Frankie agreed to do an interview on a radio program with me, and it happened to be out of Boston. And Frankie was on one phone, I was on another, in the same residence, but we weren't in the same room together. And I'm talking with the host at the beginning of the program, and then he turned his attention to Frankie. And she didn't respond to him, and all at once we hear someone sobbing, weeping in the background. And he, smart enough, he quickly breaks for a commercial. And I race into the other room, and there Frankie has her hands cupping her face, and she's going, that voice, that accent. That's exactly his voice back in 1947. Well, the host of the show, Boston, he had a heavy Brooklyn accent, and he immediately triggered all that emotion. She was reliving exactly what she experienced at that time, 40-some years before. And again, those are the type of things that really took me from a skeptic to going, my God, these people are all reading from the same script. They're all getting emotional And they're either all the best actors in the world or they're recounting exactly what they experienced back at that time in their lives.
And that must have broken your heart, because, to hear that, I mean, it's so wrong to do that to a child.
Do we have another few minutes before the break?
Yes.
I'll give you another quick example. And this was with, and I'm sure you even had the good fortune of meeting the late Dr. / Colonel Jesse Marcel Jr. I
never did. Regret.
And he just passed away now a few years ago. We're losing now the sons and daughters of Roswell. But he was there that night when his father returned back from the debris field. And at 2:00 in the morning, his father, Major Jesse Marcel, the head of intelligence at the Roswell Army Airfield, brings his mother, Viad, and Jess Jr. into the kitchen. And here he has all that debris scattered. And so Jess got to handle it himself. And he saw the symbols on the I-beam sections that were part of that gathering of that sampling of debris. Well, anyway, in 1990, we, at the bequest of the NBC Today show, we arranged to have Jess Jr. regressed and taken back to that very night. We wanted him to relive that very night. And we were so fortunate to get the late Dr. John Watkins. He was professor emeritus from the University of Montana in Missoula. He was the doctor who got the Hillside Strangler to confess under hypnosis. So we got the best. And he took Dr. Marcel back to that very night in the presence of a film crew from the Today Show. NBC was there covering it. And he was reliving it in the first person. He was quoting, the conversation was going back and forth between he and his father in the first person. And the way his father kept saying, flying saucer, pieces of a flying saucer, wreckage of a flying saucer. There was absolutely no question what they were describing and what they were handling based on that experience as we witnessed it. And then when Dr. Watkins brought him out of it, when he brought him back to the present. Now, mind you, his father had just passed away 4 years before. 4 years before. And as his son, Jess Jr., was waking up and he was coming to, and he looked around the room and he went, Dad? Dad? And the tears just started to stream down his face. And we realized, oh, my God, we just caused him to lose his dad all over again. It was that real. He was there with his father reliving this. And then it hit him that his dad was gone. And, you talk about, it wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't shame. It was just, your heart broke. You just really, you just could not fathom what he was going through, what was going through his mind at the time. And needless to say, the Today Show did not carry that segment. They did not air that because Brian Gumbel decided it was too controversial. It was too convincing, he said. So much again for, the media always striving to present the truth. No, if it's too truthful, even back then, that was 1990, even back then, it was too truthful, too believable, too convincing.
Well, that's professional journalism for you right there.
Even then.
Oh, wow. And we're getting ready to go to break, and I want to just throw this out here before we go. But Robert Todd was a very interesting person who did a lot of FOIA requests, broke some ground, but he was also he didn't believe that Roswell was actually anything other than a mobile balloon.
In fact, he was the one that almost single-handedly, even before because pretty much the Air Force's mobile balloon report was all provided by Bob Todd and the late Carl Flock. So they just handed the explanation to them on a silver platter. But that never addressed the fact that C.B. Moore, who was in charge of the project back in 1947, when he was originally asked by Bill Moore and Stan Friedman about the possibility of this being a mogul balloon already back in 1979, and Moore said absolutely not, that there was no way, and that there was no way they could place a balloon on that ranch back at that time. So mogul was something we had looked into long before we looked at that the Air Force came out with their report in September of 1994, because we were exploring all the alternative explanations as well. So, and the main point being about mogul, it was still off the shelf material. It was material that my grandmother on their deathbed would recognize.
And that is such an interesting, and sorry to cut you off, but I just wanted to say that, it's interesting now to see how, okay, we had the mogul balloons back then, and now we've got Google Loon balloons. And so, and I had a case, and I'm not sure if I told you about it, where, it was the same type of thing, mass daytime sighting over some of the most restricted airspace in the world. And here we have people who are actually UFO researchers, whatever that means, who are jumping to that was a Google Loon balloon. No, actually, it really wasn't.
Those are
it's just so funny.
Those are the keyboard investigators.
Right.
They Absolutely. Solve everything as far as probably down in their parents' basement.
I love it. We're going to talk more about that. I'm Erica Lukes. We're going to take our break. I'm here with Don Schmitt. Do you make sure? I'm sure most of you have his books. If you don't, go to Amazon and get them. They are incredible, and I'm blessed to have them in my library. We will be right back.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the second half of UFO Classified. Again, I'm always happy to see my friends who faithfully come to chat, the people that support my show. I am getting more and more communications from people all over the world who are reaching out to me, and I love it. This is important. I really, truly hope to get good information out to the public because I believe this is, in my opinion, the most important topic that we could ever deal with, and it deserves to be dealt with integrity. I am here tonight with Don Schmitt, who has authored several best-selling books, who has done more research on Roswell than probably any other human being alive, and I love everything that you have done, and the fact that you worked with Hynek and he mentored you. That is really saying something. And I have to just throw this in here. You went on a tour with Shatner, a 31-city speaking tour with William Shatner. I have to just say that William Shatner, I have a thing for Shatner, and I'm a little jealous about this.
It all started with I was invited on numerous occasions by North Carolina MUFON to lecture specifically in Charlotte. And I was approached by a gentleman by the name of Rick Starnes. He was a producer of a Star Trek convention. And he said, you probably have never been approached by anyone, regarding this before, but I'm thinking of doing kind of a fiction or a nonfiction fiction type of conference, two-person. You could speak on Roswell and UFOs, and then I'll have some celebrity guest, speaking, of their TV or their movie, involvement, that type of thing. And so one of the first people, I agreed because I thought wonderful opportunity, new audience. I'm not preaching to the choir, so to speak. And once again, just like your show, Erica, where we reach out and we try to approach and get the truth, get the information out to as many people as possible. And every so often we find a shining star that is willing to jump on the wagon, so to speak, and help us along. And so I was doing originally quite a few shows with actor John Delancey, who played Q in Star Trek Next Generation.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, Delancey and I, because eventually he started to do the Alien Voices TV series on, it was either TNT or TBS, with Leonard Nimoy. And so they were doing live theatrical radio dramatizations where they did War of the Worlds or Lost Horizon or First Man on the Moon, that type of thing. And so they'd have that entire ensemble of all these, Hollywood types acting out different parts. And Shatner was one of them at times. Well, anyway, then I conceived the idea, now, what if I were to do that with Roswell? What if we were to time compress the incident and make it into, a one-day affair and write it up as a radio dramatization and have Foley operators, and the 1947 music and the sound effects. And because I was working with Delancey, I asked him, and he goes, Don, that sounds intriguing. I think that would be a great idea. Roswell, what are we going to call it? And I said, well, my thought is Roswell, the unheard broadcast. So that the new premise of the program would be that what if the rancher, the original witness to the crash, didn't go to the sheriff, didn't go to the military, he rather went to the media. And so I portrayed the radio announcer at KGFL in Roswell, and Delancey did all the other characters. And so we had a 2-hour presentation live at Pearson Auditorium in Roswell, and a live theater audience, and it was wonderful. Roswell, the unheard broadcast. And so that then led to, I was asked, Don, would you like to do a Star Trek convention with Captain Kirk? Well, who in the right mind would say no? And so we met at the Lubbock Coliseum, Lubbock, Texas. And all I was told, I was picked up at the airport and I was told, Don, you can wait in the limo before we drive over. And I open the door and I start to step in and I turn and guess who's sitting across from me but Mr. Shatner himself. And he immediately, started asking me questions about Roswell, and he was quite fascinated with the very notion that we were being visited and maybe one of them actually crashed back at some time. And so we went on, and to the point that every time he had a chance, he was approaching me again. Don, I have another question. So we would fly. We flew from Lubbock to Dallas to then catch a flight to San Antonio. We were speaking down at the San Antonio Theater that very evening. And I will never forget, it was Rick Starnes, the producer, myself, and Bill Shatner racing through the Dallas airport. And he had a leather garment bag over his shoulder, as big as a saddle. And he's wearing these little granny sunglasses. And everybody is doing double takes. Everybody is pointing because there the three of us are practically, trotting through the airport. And we would come to escalators and he would run up the steps and go, "Come on, boys, we're going to be late," that type of thing. And we catch our flight. We arrive in San Antonio. And we're approaching the San Antonio Theater. And the two of us are alone sitting in the back of the limo. And the sidewalk is lined with people, both sides. And Bill, he taps me on the shoulder and he goes, "Don, look at that. Look at all those people. We have a sellout." And I look out my window, and there on the marquee of the Alamo Dome, "Tonight only, the Rolling Stones." So it was like, Bill, and he looks out and, oh no, we're doomed. So he wouldn't come out of the green room. He just sat there backstage, wouldn't come out. And all at once, the producer bursts in through the door and, "We got a sellout, we got every seat sold, And Bill proudly jumps up. "I knew it, I knew we'd sell out." So 2,500 seats. And so proud. So anyway, and the experience when you're up on stage, you can barely see from all the stage lights beyond the first couple rows. And there was a balcony, and it was all I could do to hear people and the rumbling up on the upper level, but then only seeing the first couple rows. And I'm up on stage, and I'm giving an hour presentation on Roswell. And it's just before our Roswell movie premiered, our Showtime Roswell movie. So I had some trailers that I was showing, promoting the upcoming film. And out of the corner of my eye, I see sitting at the end of the front row, just beaming up at me, but Bill Shatner. And again, I couldn't have, felt more proud. It was just a wonderful experience. Well, anyway, afterwards, we're both backstage, and a stagehand comes racing back, and "Mr. Shatner, where were you? We were trying to find you." "Well, I was out in the front row. I was listening to Don." "Well, you'll never guess who was backstage wanting to meet you." "Well, who? The mayor?" "No, Mick Jagger." So
no.
So while I'm on stage with Bill Shatner in the front row listening to me, behind the curtain, immediately behind me, Jagger was pacing back and forth as they were trying to find Captain Kirk so they could meet. And so that was just the first time. And then with Shatner, and we'd be together in Davenport, Iowa, and in Milwaukee, and in Green Bay, and Rockford, Illinois, and in Greensboro, and in Raleigh, and Columbus, Ohio. And he always treated me wonderfully. For all of the bad publicity and his not getting along and being very difficult to work with, he could not have been, more of an inspiration. And, being on a small plane flying with him and just the two of us sitting there and talking about everything but UFOs and politics and entertainment. I loved it. We often talked about health and exercise and sports and that type of thing. And it was just the fondest memories, wonderful memories.
That is so wonderful. And I will tell you that I actually met Shatner at Comic-Con. I had to, pay the $120, whatever, to go backstage. And I had my daughter with me, and she was like, "Oh, I am so embarrassed. My mother has completely lost her lid." And, I got to stand next to him, and Shatner was sitting he was on a stool, and he looked over at me and kind of gave me the once over and said, "It's a pleasure to meet you." And I was just like, I honestly, that was the best probably 2 seconds of my life.
He does.
I'm glad I paid for it.
He likes the ladies. He does like the ladies, and I witnessed it many times, but I never saw him take advantage or act on it. I can honestly say that because at the time and I met his previous wife before his last. She was the one that tragically drowned in their swimming pool that time. And I know he was quite devastated by it. And I once asked him, because he has his horse ranch, and he very often brings children in, and especially handicapped children, to actually learn to ride horses. And I asked him at one point, what's the one thing you love especially about riding? And he said, Don, it gave me my legs back. So in other words, that he once again could experience running, in this case as far as sitting on a horse. But and that was a wonderful way to put it. Gave me my legs back.
I love that, and thank you for sharing that with me, because it's so much fun to hear these personal stories, and I hope someday I can meet him again, and this time not pay for the pleasure, because he's one of my heroes. I really, really like him, and
let me add this too quickly.
Yeah.
The first time I met him, they had just filmed the second version of his death scene, which they filmed in Death Valley. And he described it very poignantly, and he just constantly grabbed, Don, they killed me, that type of thing. And then when the movie premiered a few weeks later, I went to see it, and to see the death scene on the big screen, I had never felt so uncomfortable in my life. It was like I actually was watching a friend die up on the screen. And granted, it was fiction. It was just a movie, that type of thing. But it was a feeling. It lasted for days, and so I guess it demonstrated just how quickly and what good friends we became at that time. And sadly, we both have moved on, and I haven't really seen him now in over 20 years. And but again, so many just the fondest memories.
I love that. I love it. And I'm sorry, I kind of went off topic there because we were talking about Bob Todd, and I love the Shatner story, so thank you very much. But, Bob Todd and Flock, as you were, went to our break. They both basically handed the mogul balloon, excuse, whatever we want to call it, to the powers that be. And so what were your thoughts, and did you ever have any interactions with Robert Todd?
Well, I certainly did with both of them, Flock and Todd. But with Todd, it was totally antagonistic. In fact, to have gone through all of Hynek's files thereafter, and then to have seen how many antagonistic, provocative letters he had sent to Hynek through the years. Like, who are you, and what do you know, and you have nothing on me, Mr. Sign. It was just constantly, trying to push his buttons and get him to, retaliate in some shape, manner, or form. But it got to the point, it was like Hynek never responded to him, and I never responded to him, because it was always like, I know more than you do. I've never been to New Mexico. I've never spoken to a single witness, but you're wasting my time and it's like, no, pal, you contacted me. So, and then when the mogul balloon nonsense came out, and again, as I mentioned, Erica, we had already investigated, we had already looked into the mogul balloon and any type of balloon train situation years before, and found it totally wanting. And found, there absolutely no evidence, no witnesses to that effect. So my biggest concern, though, was because we were working with the late Congressman Stephen Schiff of New Mexico. And he was representing many of his own constituents who were actual witnesses to the 1947 event. And so we were meeting in Washington. We were meeting at his state office in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we were providing him with a lot of our file information, our eyewitness testimony, transcripts, information that he was using when he was submitting requests to then Secretary of Defense Les Aspin in trying to get documentation. He wanted to see the Roswell file. And he was getting stonewalled left and right. It didn't matter who he went to, he was being shut down. So I thought that when the Mogul Balloon report came out, that this was going to be the end. I thought that now that ends our working relationship. And I will never forget that very afternoon, I called the congressman at his office in Washington. And he came to the phone at my request. And I said, well, Mr. Congressman, I suppose this will be the end of your involvement. And excuse my language, but I'm going to quote him for the moment, if I may, where he said, Don, they're a bunch of goddamn liars. And as soon as I get reelected, we're going to hit them twice as hard. And I could not have been more proud of an elected, duly elected official, because he was not taking this lying down. He was not accepting this, no matter who the source, because he realized that, as we realize, all these people just could not be lying. They were all describing something extraordinary. They were all describing something of the fantastic. And it was an insult. And Schiff immediately, said it was an insult to any intelligent person in the world to believe that this was just rubber, foil, sticks, string, and tape. I mean, that's all Mogul was. And then we add a microphone to it, and it was the microphone that they thought had to be extraterrestrial. Come on, please. And I'm sorry, in the last conversation I had with him, and he was already dying of cancer, and he told me, he said, Don, don't quit. Just keep fighting. I won't be there, but you have to keep, going for the truth, because it's not anything that they claim it is. And Major James McAndrew, who was the actual co-author of the Mogul Report with Colonel Richard Weaver, and most of your audience won't know this. They never heard this before. This went on for months, and even a year after the Project Mogul nonsense came out. And who did he call? No less than a half a dozen times. But Colonel Jesse Marcel Jr., over and over again, trying to convince him that what he saw back in his parents' home, back on that evening when his dad brought that carload of material from the debris field and had scattered on the kitchen floor. And he was trying to convince him it was nothing more than foil and tape with flowers painted on it. And Colonel Marcel, Dr. Marcel would keep, nope, you weren't there. I'm sorry. I know what I held in my hands. I know that it wasn't from here. And the last time that McAndrew would call up Colonel Marcel, according to Dr. Colonel Marcel, McAndrew started to yell at him. What is it going to take to convince you that all you saw were sticks and tape and masking tape? And the colonel finally had enough, and he said, first of all, let me remind you, I outrank you. So show me a little respect. And then secondly, you are never going to convince me that what I held in my own hands back in 1947 was something not made on this earth. To which then McAndrew responded, well, Colonel, which he said very snidely, Colonel, but then he added, I guess we'll never know what you actually saw back in 1947. So he conceded. He conceded, and that's the point. Robert Todd and Carl Flock never conceded. McAndrew did. And that's where we leave this. The point being that there isn't an investigator who has legitimately looked into Roswell and there isn't an investigator in the world that can prove that this was a Mogul balloon or anything else of that sort. Because first of all, they can't place it on the ranch. Secondly, it does not match the description of the wreckage, the materials involved. And then thirdly, how do you account for the bodies recovered? I'm sorry, there were not bodies associated with a Mogul balloon or any other balloon of that sort. So disqualified. End of story.
It's just so interesting to me. I mean, there are researchers who hold Todd up. He was a fanatic about doing what he did very clearly, and it is interesting that he, at the end of the day, just it's just one of those things where he is a true believer, and then he's another example of somebody who drank the Kool-Aid, but just had a different mindset.
Well, but as I described, to see all those letters that he was questioning and lambasting J. Allen Hynek of all people. And here's someone who lived, and he lived in his parents' basement. He was still there at the age of 50. And I'm sorry, by any other definition, in any other field, that would be a loser. And I don't care what he accomplished. The point being, when it came to Roswell, he had a preconceived theory as to what happened. He set out to prove it, and he never came up with a single witness who would endorse that theory. So he stood as the lone and only proponent of that until he got others to side with it, because if it sounds good, let's use it, because anything that explains away the true nature of the incident, we accept. The point being also that Congressman Stephen Schiff did not believe the mogul balloon story for a second.
Absolutely. And that is a brilliant way to end this segment. I'm Erica Luke here with Don Schmitt. We will be right back for our last segment, so stick around.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
With Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this. What is our reality? An ever-evolving concept? An individual experience? Or just life? Tune in Saturdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern for Our Reality, hosted by Violetta Vrankovich.
You guys ready for this?
Come join the movement each and every week as we explore a range of topics, from the ordinary to the extraordinary. Violetta will emerge your consciousness with unique concepts and guests, taking you to places no other show has ever dared to go.
Carefully designed to stimulate the mind.
Our Reality, hosted by Violetta Vrankovich. Live Saturdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Our Reality.
Our Reality.
Changing the world, one topic at a time. At a time. At a time. At a time. At a time.
Vegas, baby!
Vegas' #1 source for talk and new music.
How cool is that?
Bowl for Life is a non-profit organization founded in 2013 by Chuck Gardner with one simple goal: to grow the sport of bowling worldwide. Over the years, Bowl for Life has given out thousands of dollars in scholarships to youth bowlers around the world. Our focus is to nurture integrity, honesty, professionalism, as well as respect into bowlers both young and old. You can help us by going to bowlforlife.com. Even the smallest donation goes a long way to breaking down the barriers and helping us assist people of all ages to improve their skills as well as knowledge of the game. Bowl for Life is happy to be partnered with other great organizations like the Youth Education Services Fund, as well as the United States Bowling Congress, with many spectacular integrated events planned in the near future. To learn more, go to bowlforlife.com. That's bowlforlife.com.
Are you ready to expand your consciousness? Ready to dive deep within this profound planetary ascension? Then you're ready for the Universal Consciousness Show Live Mondays, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Hosted by Augie Nost and Diana Seraphim. It's time to expand your consciousness. A time to learn new modalities. To further understand
The all.
The Universal Consciousness Show will take you on a magical journey as you explore an array of possibilities. From the paranormal to UFOs and aliens, as well as banned medical cures, you'll learn to activate knowledge hidden deep within your DNA.
The Universal Consciousness Show.
Hosted by Augie Nost and Diana Seraphim. Live Mondays, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. A deeper understanding of the universe is but a show away.
1, 2, 3, 4!
To the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Love the music. Oh, I listen all day.
The future of radio is here and now.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the final segment of UFO Classified. I'm Erica Lukes here with Don Schmitt, who has authored several best-selling books and done significant research on Roswell. We've had a very lively conversation tonight about many different things, including Bill Shatner, Roswell, and people in the field who are trying to insert themselves into the narrative and, in some cases, really, and I feel are quite nasty about the way they go about things. And so I appreciate you talking about Robert Todd. I didn't know him. I know that there are people that I care about and respect that actually care, that support his work. And so in that regard, I want to throw that out there. I know that Barry Greenwood, who's been on my show and is a very dear friend and my mentor, really supported Todd's work and things. And so it is an interesting subject that we found ourselves immersed in. And I think with regard to all the Roswell research, when you and Tom did significant work on this.
Thank you. Thank you.
So,
and to be honest with you, if you wouldn't have brought up Bob Todd, I haven't given him a thought probably in 20 years.
Well, it's important. And again, it's like when you get new people who are introduced to the subject, they have no idea who he was. And he did, like I mentioned, I mean, he was absolutely incredible with the regard, with everything that he contributed and getting the FOIA requests. He was relentless. And I'm not sure if there's ever been another person like him in that sense. And so it was interesting. The whole story needs to be remembered. And in fact, maybe I'll sometime I could invite Barry and have you on the show as well to talk about that, because it's getting kind of the two different perspectives and things. So I think that'd be a great dialogue.
And I would give Bob Todd all due credit for all of his stalwart FOIA efforts throughout his short lifetime, because he passed away at a rather young age. But the moment he essentially, and you used the word, inserted, he crossed into territory of something that he really knew nothing about. It's one thing to apply an alternative explanation to something and then be able to demonstrate how you arrived at that conclusion, but based on all the already accumulated data. But when you have to shoehorn it to fit the facts, when you have to essentially manipulate all the data just to make it work, then it's a faulty preconception on the face of it. And I'm talking, specifically regarding Roswell. I will not deny the fact that he did yeoman work as far as on much of his FOIA efforts. But I would also say he never came up with a single FOIA response to anything regarding Roswell, because we never did, and I know he never did. Because nobody ever responded to the late Congressman Stephen Schiff either regarding Roswell. Neither did they respond to Bill Clinton. Neither did they respond to Jimmy Carter, and neither did they respond to Barry Goldwater.
Right. Absolutely. And so I want to, because we're short on time, and I'm going to have you back a lot. So prepare yourself for this.
Of course. But, I would enjoy it.
I would love that. And you have spent, in fact, you go, I'm not sure if it's once or twice a year, but you go back and spend time with Mike Swords. And again, not a lot of people know who Mike Swords is, but he is a researcher and an archivist and has done pretty significant work. And I would love to have the opportunity to sit in a room with all of you. And I would love for you to just give us a little background on that meeting that you go to.
Well, Dr. Michael Swords is a professor emeritus from the University of Michigan at Kalamazoo, professor of natural history. And I love the fact that, not only did I sit on the CUFO's board for 10 years with Mike, but that we are very much into sports. We come from very athletic backgrounds. And we also, we talk on, on a lot of religious fronts as well. I know, for example, when they were testing the Shroud of Turin, and Mike was getting, phone calls and blow by blow, essentially, what was going on with the carbon dating. And I was the only other person, at the office that he could even talk to about this, that knew what was even relevant, what was going on about it, that type of thing. So Mike has also been, in many ways, he's replaced Hynek in that regard. But Mike started this, I'd say 5-6 years ago, where it's an annual, and now it's become a biannual confab of who he says are his most trusted, most respected ufologists in the field. And he invites them. The list is now up to about 30, I believe. But they come from all over the country. And some of them, they Skype in from even other countries. But because Mike has also amassed one of the largest file collections on UFO cases from all around the world, that it's a candy store. It's a feast for all of us as researchers to come in and just spend 2 to 3 days just, wading through all of this material as time permits. And then certainly the camaraderie and, being amongst kindred spirits, even when we disagree about certain things, it's never out of disrespect. It's always with a shake of the hands, and we agree to disagree, and but I still respect you and that type of thing. We stay in regular contact whenever anything arises. We always have an open exchange, an open forum as far as on the internet in that regard. But we'll be getting together this fall once again, and I relish the opportunities. I especially relish the opportunity being involved and being part of this group, because in many respects, this is exactly when Dr. J. Allen Hynek had his invisible college, as he called it. That's exactly what this is. And even if the late Dr. James McDonald were still around, this is, again, what he also would have done. The thought of bringing in and it's not a case of trying to be the smartest person in the room as much as it's having enough respect, not only for one another, but also the phenomenon. And realizing that it's not because the phenomenon has failed to demonstrate itself, it's that we always come up short. I often find older aging colleagues that all of a sudden they become more skeptical and they become doubters. And it's as though, well, if I haven't been able to solve it, it's because there's nothing there. No. It's because you failed. You failed. The phenomena has never failed. The phenomena persists. It still is as elusive and consistent as it ever was in that regard. And that's the great thing about Mike's get-togethers, that we're all there to take this to the next level. And what can we do to preserve the effort without the internal fighting and nitpicking and just the caustic element that is so pervasive in so much of ufology that nothing gets done. What's accomplished by that? I'm sorry.
Right.
It's not only unprofessional, but it's almost as though it's intended to tear it down, to wipe us off the map once and for all. And what better way to, finally discredit all of ufology than to get us to essentially destroy one another from inside. And Mike's group, that is the furthest thing, from this effort. And I love it. I truly do.
And that is amazing. I hope someday I can be honored enough to have an insight to that. I definitely think I would have.
I would be happy to make that arrangement.
Thank you. That would mean a lot to me. And I am planning on having. I've been talking with several people. We're planning on starting something along those lines here in Utah, and that'll be in March of next year, where we're bringing in different people and including people that are actually on the MUFON board of directors and other people that I respect a great deal. And thanks to Barry Greenwood, as most of my listeners know, and you know as well, I've started an archive and been collecting a lot. And so I want to do that and try to get information out to a younger generation. And I have to ask, with the Swords group, I mean, how much information gets, for me, because I'm not a part of that group, or if you have somebody who is younger in research but has genuine motivations, how in the world would anybody ever go about finding material to learn if all of it is being, kind of stored in the hands of a handful of people?
Exactly, Erica. We've had these discussions on a growing basis within just the last 2 years. First of all, how do we bring more and more young people into the field? Because at some point, obviously, the gauntlet has to be passed. And then secondly, how do we bring more women into the field? Because for so long, I mean, I even think back to like the QFOS board. At times, it was 10 men. And I would constantly bring up, and not because I was hoping that that I was out shopping, and I was hoping that we would attract some attractive young ladies into the fold, so to speak. But no, that why aren't we attracting more qualified people of really both sexes into the field that could make a difference? That we're more than just mouthpieces, that we're willing to, again, get out into the field and make things happen. We just didn't sit and wait by the phone, hoping that they get that call, that something a sighting report, just came in. And again, that was something that Hynek, truly drilled into us. You need to be proactive. You need to go out and make things happen, because that's the only way, again, that you control the nature of your research, of the investigation, and then you can steer it in such ways that if it obviously is futile, if you're not really providing anything relevant of any substance that will advance the cause, then you bail. You move on. You know enough that your time is more precious than anything. And that was the other thing that was often, told us, that we have to be selective. We have to prioritize. And I think a lot of people, too, they spin their wheels and they beat dead horses to the point that, well, we told you 2 years ago there was nothing to this report. Why are you still trying to resurrect it?
Yeah, it's interesting. And for me, as that, I mean, I'm a new kid on the block, so to speak. I mean, I've learned a lot of valuable lessons really quickly, and I've been lucky enough to have the ability to look at the bigger picture and see who's who and like that. But it has been a lot of work, and it's time consuming for me to get a hold of people, to gain their trust, for them to understand that I am not, I'm not a radio show host. I research things. I respect people, and I want people's memories to be preserved, and I want the history to be told. And it's when you want to encourage new people in the subject, and you have kind of the sequestering of all the information, and some of the old guard who, they don't want to give it up to just anybody. I mean, how that just seems, in my opinion, I think that's pretty unfair, and I think it's dangerous, especially when everyone is, unfortunately, we all expire sooner or later, and where does it go? Is the data getting swept up by people, and is it going into a place where we're never going to see it again, where the potentially the history of the subject can be completely rewritten, which in my opinion, that is very close to happening unless we make a concerted effort. I mean, what do to make a difference now? Because this is a really critical time.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And we are at that juncture now within ufology that, especially with the Swords Group, we are discussing more and more as far as the final depository situation of select files, because as ufology continues to age, and certainly a prime example being with the recent passing of Stanton Friedman, and as to the disposition of his materials, that this all needs to be preserved for future researchers. And let's cite the example of the very government who supposedly has had the inside track, at least for the 20-some years they were involved. When the Air Force Project Blue Book files were declassified in 1977, it made reference to many of the cases that were not part of the declassified files. For example, it references 20 gun camera cases. Well, where are those gun camera films? Where are they? Will we ever have access? Will they ever be declassified? And so where are they being preserved? Are they preserved, or are they lost forever? And then if you throw into the mix that within Blue Book, there's barely any mention of any Navy cases, any Army cases. Well, have UFOs been an exclusive, situation only involving Air Force personnel? Well, of course not. In fact, the Navy, globally covers much more of the planet than the Air Force comes even close to. So, again, it's a prime example of where is all that data now resting? Where is it? Is it all in the archives? No, because it hasn't been declassified. But the point is, we don't even know where to look for it. We don't even know who to contact. And as a result, then I guess we have to police our own houses, so to speak. And we have to do it at least for ourselves. If we cannot preserve the very information accumulated by our own colleagues, do we honestly believe we're ever going to find out what actually happened as far as within the ranks of the military? No. So we got to start with ourselves. And that's where it becomes all the more incumbent on us to make such arrangements, to encourage people to write something out, to make sure that they have made final plans for the preservation of their materials, their files, and they keep them accessible. There are too many collections that are sitting in basements of universities right now, and no one will ever see another page of such information. And to me, that's a crime. That's a crime as far as against history, and a crime against as far as the efforts of all legitimate ufology.
Right. And so I have to ask you, I mean, how do you feel about some of our history and different archives going overseas? Do you think they should stay in the United States? Because I do, personally.
Oh, of course, because again, they need to remain accessible here. Once overseas, that would severely limit their accessibility to American ufologists. Yeah, and we're talking principally American cases. So why shouldn't I would respect the same thing in their respective countries. I wouldn't expect the British, the MOD cases that that wind up here in the States, and certainly the alternative. It shouldn't be the case as well.
And thank you. I mean, I really strongly feel that this is something that we need to focus on, and we need to, just get to be like you do with Swords and that group. We need to really have a dialogue and maybe include a few more people to address this, because I'm here. I'm game, and I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And I know that I respect you, and I respect the work that you've done, and I really feel we can do this together. And I have no doubt.
A united effort, and I think we all would be amazed just how much we might accomplish in a year's time.
I know. I'm game, so let's do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Here. Where, yeah, absolutely. Where are you speaking next?
Actually, I just finished filming with a Spanish film crew, then an Italian film crew. I just got back from filming with a Japanese film crew, and I am now getting ready to go back to Roswell. I have a number of talks in New Mexico, and then some work with the city. And they're planning on putting together a destination solar system project, and they would like me to consult on it. So I want to provide them some of my suggestions and ideas. So we want to get that off the ground. We're doing major revamping of the displays at the museum, and I'm heavily involved with that. And I'm going to be starting another book in the next few weeks. And aside from that, I have talks coming up in Illinois, in Rochester, New York, Sedona, Phoenix, a couple in California at the end of the year, and I go to Australia for 3 cities, end of October, beginning of November.
Oh, that'd be great. Wow. How wonderful. I can't wait to have you back on the show.
And all talking about Roswell, so.
That's good. And I love hearing about that, because sometimes, for me, I get like, oh, here we go, Roswell again. But then I hear you talk about it, and I hear, the stories that you shared with me tonight, and it's like, okay, I get it. And I think it's really important.
Granddaddy of them all. Still the granddaddy of them all.
Absolutely. And there's so much more to learn. I love this process, and it's been nice to get to know you, and I can't wait to hang out at a lecture with you and have a milkshake.
Same here. I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Erica. Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely. Yes, we absolutely will. And I wanted to thank everyone for being here. And I'm hoping in your library you have Don's books. They're incredible. We didn't get to talk about your co-author much, but or at all, and I would love to have you back again to hear about that.
A quick plug in, our latest book is just out, entitled UFO Secrets Inside Wright-Patterson. So it's not Area 51, it's Wright-Patterson that everything went, especially from the aftermath of Roswell, where all the wreckage and the remains went, and the long history of crash retrieval cases, and Wright-Patterson was always ground zero.
And I didn't even get to ask you about Len Sternfield. So, okay, prepare yourself for coming back.
Yes. Knew Len very well and would love to talk about him very fondly. Yes.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you so much. And I want to say that if the best place to get your books would be Amazon, right?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and certainly any fine bookstores throughout the country, yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. I want to thank all of my listeners, and I had a very generous donation tonight, which means the world to me. Again, you are the reason that I'm here. I really believe in the integrity of this subject, the history. I love having people on to share their work, because this is what I do and what I love, and I'm very passionate about it, as you know. So anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Please make sure that you take a moment to share the links for the show, get them on your social media to help me get information out. And again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here and spending a Friday evening with me. I be around for a wonderful show, and I'm going to be sticking around for this. Paul Eno is going to be unwilling Miranda's show tonight, Paris Matrix. Stick around, have a safe weekend, and we'll catch you next week.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just